Well, we'd like to welcome everyone to our work session tonight. Thank you for being here December 13th on this snowy night. And we're really grateful that we can hear from IPA tonight to enlighten us about power in general and with our city. And so we're really glad that you're here tonight. And I'll turn the time over to Alan Johnson if you want to introduce Cameron.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, it's a privilege to introduce Cameron Cowan, whatever the name is here, I'm sorry. He's a general manager of IPA. He has had that job for just about a year. He's doing a great job, and he's here to kind of give us an idea on the repowering and some of the things that we've got going on. So I know he's got a presentation, but I'll turn the time over to Cameron. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Alan. I've really enjoyed my time with our board, which Alan is a member of. And, he does a great job. Appreciate him. So I'll just get my presentation up. I am plugged in, yeah.
Do you see the little green light on your microphone? Is that?
I do. It is
Okay,
on.
so if you wouldn't mind just
Pull that
speaking into
closer.
the mic.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
thank
bet.
you so much.
Well, let's see. It's not showing. There we go. Yeah, so I appreciate the time to come and spend a little bit of time with you to kind of give an update of the IPP Renewed project. I would suspect that Bountiful is probably as informed as any of our member cities, given some of your representation. Obviously, with Alan as a member of our board, and Kate as familiar with this project as probably any elected official in this state. And we appreciate what she does for us. Please feel free to stop me anytime along the way. Happy to talk about anything. I'll start a little bit about kind of IPA 101, I guess, just a little bit of history about the project, because these things, we're 40 years old at this point, and so this history gets lost along the way a lot of the time, and so I think it's important to understand our structure and our governance. The project was, IPA was formed in 1977, you see, by 23 Utah municipalities, of course, one of which is Bountiful. Each Utah representative each Utah municipality selects a representative for their city to the project. And of those 23 representatives, a 7-member board of directors is elected. So Bountiful's representative is Alan, and he also has been elected to serve on the IPA board of directors. And the 23 Utah cities are the owners in IPA, and IPA is the owner of the Intermountain Power Project. So there's a lot of acronyms: IPA, IPP. IPP is the project itself that sits in Millard County. So you see there, the project consists of 2 very large generators that combined can produce about 1,800 megawatts of power, and you can see that can service up to 1.5 million households. It was built large by design. The Utah cities alone could not take this amount of power. It was decided from the very beginning, we'll go out and find power purchasers or partners in Southern California that can take a lot of power, so we can build these large power blocks, gain economies of scale. The project also consists of 2 transmission systems, one that runs south to Southern California. The northern transmission system has 2 legs, one that runs east to Mona, and that's where it enters the Utah grid. And then another leg that goes west out to what's called Gondar, Nevada, and that services one of the co-ops out in eastern Nevada. And as you see, we began commercial operations in 1986. So the map here just kind of shows the participants, the Utah participants ranging in the north, Logan all the way south to Hurricane. In the yellow areas, the orange areas are the cooperative purchasers in Utah and surrounding states, and then the 6 Southern California participants. So in addition to the IPA board, there's another governing body called the Coordinating Committee, and the Coordinating Committee consists of all of the purchasers together. So there's representation from the Utah cities as well as the 6 Southern California participants and the cooperatives. The next slide here kind of shows the way the voting at the coordinating committee takes place. On the left, you see the entitlements of each of the cities. The Utah cities and the co-ops are aggregated to 21%. The 6 Southern California cities add up to about 79%. Those percentages are actually very, very key because at the coordinating committee level, and I'll reiterate, for any action to take place, it requires approval of the IPA board and the coordinating committee. At the coordinating committee level, for any action to pass, it requires an 80% vote. So again, the 21% held by the Utah cities is crucial. So nothing can be done unilaterally by the California cities, and nothing can be done unilaterally by the Utah cities either, for that matter. It does require cooperation, and it's an arrangement that's worked quite well over the life of the project. It has required cooperation amongst all the participants. I believe virtually every vote that has come before the coordinating committee has been unanimous because there's been enough discussion ahead of time. You know where the votes are. You know who's going to approve what. You know what everybody is in agreement of. So again, that 21% held by Utah entities is crucial. On the right-hand side, you see the reflection of the effect of what's called the excess power sales agreements. All the Utah entities have an excess power sales agreement and that's an agreement held with some of the California cities. And this is a really key point of this project and very, very unique for that matter. If the power is not economic for the Utah cities, you can, at your own decision, lay it off to the California cities. And they bear all the cost for that. You bear none of the cost if you're not receiving power. It's very, very unique. Maybe it's the only arrangement you find in this industry, truthfully. And it's I believe, worked very, very well for the Utah participants. This last summer was the first time, and I'll skip a bit, it's been probably 9 years since any Utah cities have recalled power just because it wasn't economic. You have other resources that are cheaper, and so you haven't needed it. But this last summer was different, and certainly Alan could speak to this. Other resources were not available, primarily hydro. Natural gas is more expensive. So Utah cities did recall power this last summer for the first time in quite some time. And the aggregate savings for Utah City was about $6 million. I believe, talking with Alan, I think Bountiful's share of that $6 million is about $800,000. And that's just for the summer season between March and September. And I don't think the election has been made yet, but I think we expect Utah cities to continue to take advantage of that recall option during the summer seasons in the coming years. One key point, even with the layoff, and so in times when Utah purchasers are taking 0% of the power, the entitlement shares that you see on the left still govern at the coordinating committee level. So even though you're not recalling power, Utah cities still retain those voting rights. Again, I think a lot of times it gets lost on people. If Utahns aren't taking the power, the project must not be important to them. We hear it all the time. It's a California, it's an LA project. It's not a Utah project. I think the real value for the Utah cities really lies in that excess power sales agreement. Kate coined this phrase. It's basically power food storage that you don't have to pay for. It's on the shelf if you need it, like this last summer, and if you don't need it. And it's with any other project that you might be looking into participating in, there will likely be a cost associated whether you think you might need the power or not. You're going to be on the hook for fixed costs. So this is a really key feature. And we'll talk about it more, but this feature remains in the renewal power period. Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, quick question. So when, say, 100% of the power is sold to California, is that done at a surplus and those funds go back to the cities in Bountiful or in Utah?
It's not. All of the power is sold at cost.
Okay.
So there's not a profit associated with the power. So they just assume the cost for that power that they're receiving that you're not.
And this past year, we just saw that it was the most economical way for us to provide power to our city.
Yeah, if you notice, because of other resources that had gone away, the pool price through UAMPS was $109 per megawatt hour. And from IPP, it was about $59. So, yeah, you're welcome. I won't go through these point by point, but over the life of the project has provided significant economic benefits to the local and state economy. You can see some of those numbers there at the bottom, indirect multiplier of $866 million. These numbers have come from the Utah Foundation. They've done studies for both past benefits. They've also done studies for the renewal project and anticipated benefits for the renewal project as well.
Cameron, can I
Yep, please do.
interject for just a minute? Colleagues, just as a note, it's very unusual for an interlocal entity organized by Utah governments to pay any type of taxes.
Yeah, we'll flip down here. That's where we talk tax benefits, yeah.
Imagine if the recreation district, of which we are a part, through interlocal agreements in a special service district, imagine if that entity paid property tax or sales tax, like what, it's just a very unusual feature. Usually government-owned entities are tax exempt, so the fact that this entity is owned by governments, local governments, and pays significant taxes is unique among all entities in the state of Utah.
And I think, and we hear it a lot, there's this heavy California influence, and as I mentioned from the beginning, Utah entities in the 70s invited those California participants to join to build something big, and without that California participation, none of this happens. If this was exclusively a Utah municipal project, these taxes wouldn't be paid. Truth be told, the project is never built probably without that California participation. But even if it's built, something very, very small is built, and these taxes don't exist. And also to Kate's point, we've never received any tax incentives from any entity, state entity. We don't receive any taxpayer funds at all. All of the money received by IPA is through the sale of power. Of course, we know things have changed dramatically over the years, beginning in about 2006, I want to say, with passage of Senate Bill 1368 in California, that in essence outlawed coal power is what it does. It was done setting a standard, a greenhouse gas standard of 1,100 pounds per megawatt hour. No coal facility can meet that. And they're allowed to continue their existing contracts through 2027, but beyond 2027, they can no longer receive power from the project as it currently exists. There was a lot of work done by my predecessors to find replacement purchasers for that power, for the coal power, talking to other large regional utilities, other large entities like Rio Tinto that could potentially need that power, and there just was not an appetite for that power. And again, some of the constraints are just the sheer size of those coal units. Utah entities alone couldn't absorb even one unit's minimum load. They're just too large. And there are just a number of constraints that other utilities are under, their own renewable portfolio standards and other resources they have available. There just was not an appetite for those units. There was not a buyer that came forward. And then other regulatory obstacles, there would be significant costs associated with maintaining those coal units, maintaining new requirements for the coal combustion residuals, the ash that comes from there, the pollution control equipment. There would need to be substantial investment to meet current regulations. So there was a decision point that the IPA board had to make a decision, and it was a very real possibility to have happen at this site what has happened in other communities that coal power plants exist. If any of you have been down near Lake Powell recently, you used to see those big stacks on the horizon, and those are gone, and that plant is completely gone. It's a flat spot in the desert now. And that was a real possibility for this project, but there was a lot of interest. There's just so many benefits to this site that you can see on this slide that it made sense to maintain something, to keep something in that site. And if it couldn't be for our purchasers' coal power, then let's find an alternative that we can utilize a lot of these resources that we have available to us. So there's, again, extensive work. We amended the current power sales contracts to allow a conversion to natural gas. The amendment of those contracts would have had to come before this body. That probably took place in about 2015 or so. And then the execution of renewal power sales contracts. Those were signed in, I believe, 2017, and those would have come before this council as well. And those renewal power sales contracts extend the life of the project another 50 years, to 2077. And again, that last slide I think is key, that excess power sales agreement provision, that remains in the renewal period. And I'll be honest, this is one place we can specifically point to show that those votes, that 21% was key, because that's actually a difficult thing for the California entities, Los Angeles, to deal with, that excess power sales agreement, because power planning you need to know what you're going to have in advance. And they didn't necessarily want that, but that was a deal breaker for the Utah entities. If we don't get it, it doesn't happen. And so there were some slight modifications to the way that recall can happen. And so I think Utah cities will have to be a little bit more mindful when they recall the power. They'll have to probably keep it a little bit longer than just being able to seasonally take it, put it back. But again, you get to participate in this project without any financial risk if the power's not economic to you. So the renewal project is it's full speed ahead. We expect well over $2 billion of investment in transmission and generation upgrades and building the new generating facilities. We issued our first series of bonds earlier this year. Those were sold in April or so, April, I believe. About $800 million. We expect probably about 2 more tranches of bonds to be sold over the next couple of years to complete that work. And there's also work being done across the street, and we can talk a little bit about, if you're familiar with the ACES project, Advanced Clean Energy Storage, that is a partnership between Mitsubishi and Magnum Energy. Magnum is the entity that is developing the salt caverns underneath the property, the salt dome that exists literally right underneath the IPP plant. I would call it serendipitous. I don't know the right word for it, but the fact that this type of very rare formation exists under this project is it's hard to explain truthfully. And so they can solution mine out these massive caverns that can store different products. We'll use it to store hydrogen. And so the ACES group is working on that project, and we do have agreements with them. They will provide the 30% hydrogen. When the new gas units are operational in 2025, they'll be able to co-fire 70% natural gas, 30% hydrogen. And then the plan is to scale that up to 100% hydrogen over 20 years, if not faster, if possible.
Question for you, if I could.
Yeah, please.
Last year, at the time of the bonds issuance, interest rates were spiking,
Yeah.
and we had some delays because of county and legislature discussions. What did that cost us?
We've calculated about $93 million. The difference in rates between February, when we wanted to sell bonds, and April, when we were actually able to sell the bonds, was about $93 million in interest costs.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So we're hopeful that we can keep our schedule going forward. We know that markets are very volatile, and rates are doing crazy things. So yeah, we hope to be able to move forward with further bond issuances without similar type obstacles. The use of hydrogen is, it certainly is an emerging technology, and I don't think it's a stretch to say that the eyes of the energy world are on this project. We see articles throughout the world pretty regularly that are referencing this project, and it's not a science fair project. It's all existing technology. There are combustors that burn hydrogen. There are producing hydrogen through electrolysis has been done for decades, and storing hydrogen in salt caverns has actually been done for decades. I think what's unique is bringing those all together at one site at the scale that we're doing it is a little bit unique. Hasn't been done at this scale. But it's an exciting project, and we think surrounding development, there's a lot of interest in building solar around the site that can go down the Southern Transmission System to our Southern California purchasers, as well as use that solar power to produce the hydrogen. There's currently about 3,000 megawatts worth of interconnection requests that want to tie into our transmission system. So there's great interest. And most of that land around that property it's BLM and Sitla land. So Sitla stands to benefit financially from all of that development as well. And I should also note the caverns are Sitla land as well. So they receive money from the development of those caverns as well. So there's great benefit there.
Question,
Yeah.
where does the hydrogen come from, and then how does it get to the site?
Okay, that's a great question. So because of the needs of our purchasers, namely the Southern California purchasers, we'll be using what's called green hydrogen. We'll actually move over here. Green hydrogen is produced through using renewable energy, taking water, using that renewable energy to split the molecule, hydrogen, oxygen, and then storing the hydrogen underground. So that's what's called green hydrogen. Hydrogen has lots of different named colors, and that really just has to do with how it's produced. Currently, the most common method is using natural gas. It's called steam methane reformation. And then blue hydrogen is that same method, but then capturing the carbon. This is a key point for this project because we've heard a lot of, for lack of a better word, naysayers about taking water, this precious Utah resource. Some have said it's destroying the water molecule. And so while yes, you do split it, after you burn it, the hydrogen goes back up in the air, it finds oxygen molecules, and they become water again. That was a point of the legislation last year resulted in a water study. It was HB 393 to say what are the effects on the water cycle of hydrogen and energy production. I highly encourage, and I know Kate can point you exactly to it, that report was provided to the Public Utilities, Energy, and Technology Subcommittee, Interim Committee last month. The State Water Engineer commissioned the University of Utah to do that study, and it validated everything we've been saying about water and our water use. And I'll actually move on to talk about our future water use. But the gentleman who's a PhD from the University of Utah said that hydrogen combines fairly quickly with oxygen. The byproduct is water. He even said all of that hydrogen becomes water again, and it just enters the water cycle again like any evaporated water or water condensation from the cooling towers at our current facility. So again, water has been a hot topic, especially for this project. So the renewal project will use substantially less water than we have historically used and are even using right now. The original project was planned for 4 coal units. Changing demand during planning, we only ended up building 2 units, but by that time we had already acquired enough water for 4 units. So you can see that our water rights, we average 45,000 acre feet annually. That's shares. We own shares in irrigation companies. We actually don't own the water rights. The irrigation companies own the rights. We own shares in those companies. So that average 45,000 acre feet, there's a lot of years that we don't get that full allotment just based on, just water years and how much is available. So at our peak usage, we used about just a little over 25,000 acre feet. All the rest, whatever we don't use at the facility gets leased to agricultural users in the area. So it's been beneficially used every year. In recent years, the units have not been running near capacity. So in recent years, we've been using about even less than 12,500 acre feet annually. When the renewal project is complete, so in essence the gas units, they will use 6,500 acre feet annually. And once we are using 100% hydrogen, that hydrogen supply will require 2,500 acre feet annually. So when we're operating at 100% hydrogen, we'll be using about 9,000 acre feet annually, which as you can see is substantially less than we're using now with the coal units. That the State Water Engineer study, in essence, validated these numbers. They're presented differently, but that study compares power generation using hydrogen using coal and natural gas. Natural gas and hydrogen are fairly similar. I guess I think hydrogen was slightly higher primarily because you need to produce the fuel, the hydrogen. But coal, then they also in part of that study added a carbon capture component to coal and natural gas, and that water usage shoots sky high. It's uses far more than what hydrogen will use. And then you'll know there will be a 2-year usage of 7,000 acre feet, and that's to produce the caverns that will be needed. So again, this is a key point. I recommend, and again, maybe Kate can point you to the video. It's interesting to watch the presentation of that water study. And again, I believe it validated what we've been saying for quite some time that people like to refute. So just a couple pictures from construction. On the left it's actually a really large drill rig, and that's over on the ACES site, drilling down to the top of the salt dome. The salt dome, I think to get to it, it's about 3,000 feet worth of drilling. The salt dome itself is about 2 miles by 1 mile. That's how big we're talking. And one average size cavern is about the size of the Empire State Building, and they can probably put about 100 caverns. It's kind of hard to grasp because it's just underground, you can't see it. But so they're drilling 2 holes to get down to produce 2 different caverns. And then on the right, some of the subterranean work happening for the natural gas unit. So there is substantial work taking place. It's well underway. So just a few key points as we conclude. Again, the layoff structure is key for Utah cities. Basically allows you to lay off the financial risk for the project, and also water use is a key point as well. That's all I have for it. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
So some of the things, just as you all know, my day job means I spend significant amounts of time at the Capitol and at the state legislature. The legislature was, and some key members of the legislature were deeply interested in the operations of IPA. At one point, there were about a dozen bills targeted solely at IPA. They were whittled down to about 3 bills that were part of a package that allowed the legislature to feel like they had insight into the operations and oversight of operations. I'm not sure I agreed with the state's interest in oversight versus the important oversight that cities that own the project have, but this package of 3 bills moved forward, and IPA left with the assurance that you could move forward with this project, and you would have certainty in order to borrow the funds necessary. Cameron didn't mention this, but one of the things that's important is the bonds that they are taking out for this project, that we're not backing them, and neither are the other cities. They're completely backed by the wholesale sale of power. So we get to have this power food storage without putting any of our own money really into the development or at risk via the bonds. So the ability for this project to move forward, even though it moved forward $93 million more expensive because of the legislative delays, was I think really important as we've looked at impacts to our power portfolio that we've heard about, our impacts to our Echo Hydro and Pine View and Colorado River Storage Project. I think it's unfortunate that there has been some indication that that legislative certainty that we left last session with doesn't seem to be holding. So I think it's something we're going to need to be legislatively aware of.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Thank you for this presentation. It's so informative and really important for us as a council to get, this deep dive understanding. And thanks, Councilwoman Bradshaw, for your work on this, in this arena. So one thing that was mentioned in the presentation was the collection of different taxes and fees that kind of accrue benefits to the residents of the 23 partnering cities, or to the cities. And I'm just wondering, I think a number, 720 million was,
So let me just, so these are not, so these taxes are paid to a few different jurisdictions.
okay,
the-
that's just,
And the top one, the $500 million, it's a fee in lieu of ad valorem tax. It's a property tax. That's largely Millard County receives the benefit of that. Some of our properties' transmission systems flow through other counties, so they get a small portion of that, but vast majority of that has been collected by Millard County. Gross receipts tax is received by the state. It's a surrogate for the state income tax. We don't pay an income tax, so it was written into code that we would pay a gross receipts tax. We're actually the only entity in the state that pays this gross receipts tax. But that has been paid exclusively to the state of Utah, and then sales of use taxes to certain jurisdictions. So these are not taxes paid by or to the Utah cities. You're welcome.
so I have one more question. With the advanced, ACEs,
Oh.
okay. Is there any, are they completely a different entity? They're not associated with the IPP at all? So all of their
correct.
funding is coming
They've
through different
received,
sources?
that's right. Their funding, they've received a loan through the Department of Energy. That they are a completely separate entity. That's correct. And then this project will pay them as they provide hydrogen and storage to the project. One key point I'll make about the hydrogen component to this project, for the Utah cities, your contract, your renewal, your power, second mandatory power sales contract and the renewal power sales contracts are for natural gas energy. So until Utah cities actually opt into the hydrogen component to this project, you have the right to receive power at natural gas prices. So if it's not economic early on, and in essence, City of Los Angeles will subsidize the difference. That's what your contract is for. And there is a hydrogen billing procedure that's been developed that says as much, that if it becomes economic and it's, or for some reason your city feels it's important for you to participate in the hydrogen project, until that point, you don't have to pay hydrogen costs. That's not what your contracts call for. So, and again, back to the excess power sales agreement, you don't have to pay anything if you choose not to take any of the power. I see questions forming in your minds. Go ahead.
Just as a quick follow-up to that, can you give us a little bit of a snapshot on what the price comparison is right now with hydrogen?
I actually don't have that. I don't know that we fully understand that at this point.
Okay.
I think that's still being developed to understand what the cost associated with hydrogen development will be.
You expect it to be more, it sounds
do.
like.
Yeah, more than natural gas. In the initial stages, I believe most certainly. The hope is, and because it is gaining a lot of traction, the hope is those prices will consistently come down. It's primarily the cost of the electrolyzers and the equipment needed for electrolysis. But the expectation is those costs will be dropping fairly considerably over the next couple of decades.
Can I explain my understanding and you tell me if I'm wrong, where I'm
I
wrong?
may or may not be able to, but I'll take a crack. Yeah.
Just very basic. So today, we have a power plant that's coal-powered. California doesn't want coal-powered power anymore. So we're developing an alternative to continue to operate this facility, which is natural gas and hydrogen. The hydrogen component of it is made from the water that we currently have to the facility, and the hydrogen becomes a byproduct of that water. The hydrogen is then used to run turbines, create power, and then that hydrogen goes back into the water cycle. And that's all supposed to be done by 2027?
2025. The new gas units will be complete and operational July 1 of 2025. And at that date, it will be 30% hydrogen, 70% natural gas.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So the ACES project, they will be able to provide enough hydrogen for the 30%. So to get to 100%, there will need to be a lot more work done to supply that hydrogen supply. Whether it be some with ACES, other developers, it's possible that IPA could produce its own hydrogen. We have a lot of land, we do have water, we could install. I'm speculating, there's been no talks about really how to get there, but there could be a lot of options there.
I have one more question. And all of that's being paid by California
Yeah.
and not
As
Utah
long
cities?
as long as Utah cities don't recall power, you're not paying any of it. And so we've issued bonds starting, once the units are complete in 2025. If you elect to recall that power, then you'll pay for the cost of that power.
The
But
users
not
of the
the
power.
hydrogen component of it until you elect to become hydrogen purchasers.
And what, do you see any obstacles between now and 2025 that would get in the way of this conversion?
Honestly, as Kate said, I think the biggest obstacle that we're seeing right now is potential legislative obstacles. Truthfully, all major contracts for the generators have been signed. There's still one contract to be signed, that's for the transmission component, and that's just on the southern transmission system. That's the transmission line that goes to Southern California. That's also being upgraded. So there's one major contract that still has to be signed there, but all the contracts for the generation and the ACES contract, those have been signed, and those are on track, and we don't foresee obstacles to the actual work to be done.
All the permits are in
All
place.
the permits are in place, correct. So, yeah, speaking honestly, I think that's the only obstacle that I think could derail us.
I'm really impressed with how the cities are all through the state. 23 cities that are all through the state. So all of those different various cities have lots of different representatives, and it's just vital that we all really talk to our representatives.
Yeah, I agree, and it's fun. I'm sorry if I interrupted you. The size, you're talking Murray maybe Murray and Bountiful are probably our largest cities, down to cities like Oak City and Meadow and Holden. From fairly large cities to very small cities. It's a wide range for sure.
Could we go back to the pie chart?
You bet.
Just for my own curiosity, and so I can put this into context. So for the Southern California cities that are taking those percentages from us, do we know how those percentages translate into their load? Like, is that,
Oh, that's a good question. The only one that stuck out to me, and so Anaheim is not actually one of the renewal, but you see that Anaheim has 13% entitlement. And what I was always told that when they were using all of their entitlement, that was about half of their load. And the only reason I remember that
so
is
we're
'cause
running Disneyland?
well, half of Disneyland. And I made sure to tell my kids it was just the good rides at Disneyland.
Just the good rides,
Right,
okay.
yeah, exactly.
So at
Small
one
World is
point,
not
at one
IPP
point,
power,
that
sorry.
13% was half of all of their energy.
That's right, when they were taking their full load, right.
Wow.
That would be interesting. I'd have to go and ask and see what percentage of, say LA's 48% entitlement is.
I think that's a valuable piece of information, so we can really put it into context how dependent these cities are.
Yeah,
Not that that should be, I don't know, I think that's just an interesting piece for my own understanding.
Did I hear you right that Small World was not part of the,
that's what I told my kids. That's what I told my kids.
I want to be able to
Yeah.
defend that.
Getting Disney
Yeah.
Studios.
Tower of
too.
Terror,
Burbank
Tower of
is-
Terror, that's IPP power, kids.
That's interesting, because this is all where I grew up, all of these cities, that's where I grew up.
So in the renewal period, I'll just point out, three Southern California cities, well, Anaheim did not renew. Riverside and Pasadena later took an off-ramp that they had. So it's just Los Angeles, Burbank, and Glendale are the only three Southern California cities that renewed. In Utah, all but two really small munis renewed. I think Monroe and Meadow are the only two that didn't renew.
When you say renewed, that is,
Signed the renewal contracts,
The new 50-year.
the new 50 years. So everybody's still in until 2027. Right.
so what is the story that's being told to the legislators that that's getting their attraction to try to slow this process down or stop this process?
You know, we're really trying to educate everybody on the benefits to Utah cities, and both currently and in the future, and Utah cities' benefit that they're receiving from this project. I mean, personally, I think the biggest problem that some are having, it's really just the departure from coal, and some are looking at the only benefit to Utah is if we're taking and utilizing Utah coal. And we're trying to educate them on all the other benefits that this project provides. I mean, all those taxes that we talked about, that's flowing to this, and the multiplier effect. And I think some are looking at what is there currently and what will be. And I think the accurate comparison is what will be and nothing, because nothing was the alternative. It's maintaining what was there. We found that was not an option. There was nobody there to take them and absorb that energy. And so again, the picture of what's happening in Page was a real possibility. And what, you know, Alan and the rest of the IPA board worked really hard to do is make sure something is there to replace what's there currently.
Sometimes I think we throw out numbers about, you know, how many megawatts the plant can generate, and it's hard to get a sense of the scale. I mean, I'm not sure necessarily how much it's taking to charge my iPhone at home or turn on the lights, right? Like, it's just, they're big numbers, and if you're not in the engineering space like Alan, these numbers might not mean anything to you. So sometimes it's helpful to have some examples. Kennecott is the largest single power user in the state of Utah, and they use 300 megawatts annually. So these power plants at IPP at 1,800 megawatts are the equivalent of 6 Kennecotts. They're so big. And that became part of the challenge of finding purchasers if California was not able to be, the California munis were not able to be our partners. Where would you find 6 Kennecotts in the municipal power arena in Utah or somewhere where you could get a transmission line to? And that was a significant challenge. The other thing I just wanted to note, because we have one legislator here and I know more coming, we've definitely had some legislative challenges. I wouldn't say that those challenges have in any way, shape, or form been from those that represent the city of Bountiful, and in fact, they've been some of the most helpful in listening to our concerns and being willing to take those concerns forward. So just wanted to make sure we noted that.
Thanks, Kate. One other thing, talking about the conversion, right? Like any other business, if you lose your largest purchaser, and truthfully, the purchaser that's keeping your business alive, you either adapt or die. And that was really the choice that IPA was faced with. And so again, a lot of work went into it, and we are where we are now, and we see, you know, a guaranteed path for another 50 years as an economic engine in that county. So,
Can I ask a question? Can you just talk about coal and the limitations of getting the coal needed for this facility in general? I don't know if we've talked about that
Sure.
much tonight.
No, we haven't. There are substantial challenges right now. Going earlier this year, the challenges primarily resided around transportation issues with railroads. They weren't able to deliver consistently. They cited largely labor issues. And just when that started to alleviate in the fall, one of Utah's largest mines caught fire. And we have received a substantial amount of coal from that mine, and so that's been a real challenge. And we can't currently receive what we need, and it's caused us to, and has run at really low loads and shut one unit off to try to preserve coal for the summer season when people really need the power. And so that's what's happening currently, and we're not the only power plant doing that. There are other power plants in the state that are, I believe, doing the same thing we're currently doing, running at really low loads to preserve coal for a future season, because right now there's just not a supply available for us. And that has been a sticking point, back to legislative issues. Historically, historically, the vast majority of our coal comes from Utah, but there have been times where challenges have persisted in the local coal market that have pushed us to buy some tonnages outside the state. And that has rubbed some the wrong way, even though it's done out of prudence, not out of, just on a whim because we want to. It's done because we need to reliably source a fuel to be able to reliably run the power plant. And we now sit in the exact same kind of situation where we can't source our coal exclusively in the state of Utah. It's just not available to us.
So of the cities who have opted out, did they opt out before or after they knew hydrogen was an option
Probably before.
before? So
Probably.
have we reopened discussions with them, or is that?
No. And the California side of it, it's just a different, I think it's largely the way their power markets are organized in Southern California. The three cities that Exeter belong to what's called the California ISO. And so they pool resources together. And so just looking at their future resource planning and what they had available through the Cal ISO, they just didn't see this as a need, whereas the other three don't belong to that. In Utah, I couldn't speak. They're both really, really small cities. And they just didn't view it as a need for them going forward. So I don't see us reopening, those discussions for the contracts.
Just a quick follow-up to the issue of recalling the power. And that's one of the benefits, is we retain that right to recall the power if we need to, like we did last summer. I'm just wondering if you have any information or statistics on what percentage of the power capacity or output last summer was diverted to cities that recalled.
If I recall, we actually collected that, and I want to say this was in the October time frame. Collectively, the Utah municipal cities and the cooperatives combined for about 5% of the total output for the year through October. And so the Utah cities didn't start taking any of that power till March. And the way the recall works, the Utah cities can't just in December decide we want our 14% in March. There's a long-term, and Alan can probably speak to this better than I can. He probably understands the mechanisms of the recall better than I do. But there's a long-term recall, and then there's a seasonal recall. And so December, and I think any day now probably you'll be making your elections for this summer season, you can take your seasonal recall. But on the seasonal recall, you can only, collectively, the Utah cities can only take up to, I believe, 50 megawatts. And so some cities have had some forethought, and so they have indicated that they do want a long-term recall ahead of time. And then historically, they get to this time of year and they can say, never mind on that long-term, we'll put it back to you. So the way the recall works, you can't just within that 3-month window say we're going to take all 14%. It's going to be a smaller amount. You'd have to indicate further ahead of time to get up to your full allotment. So, I want to say that number is about 5% year-to-date through October.
Did that require that the plant generate more power, or?
No, it just means that the Californians get less.
Okay.
Because the way we're dispatching now, again, as I mentioned with coal supply problems, it's really geared towards making sure that during that summer season, it's really July through September, there's enough coal to burn, be running basically at full load. That's what we're trying to preserve coal for, is just that 3-month window when people really, really need it.
My last question.
Yeah.
How long have you been with IPP?
I've been at IPA for approaching 17 years now.
Okay.
And like Alan said, general manager just for the last year. Great place to work. A lot of great people.
Any other questions that we have for Cameron? Really great information. Thank you
Really
so
appreciate
much.
it. And feel free to reach out to me. You obviously have great resources in Alan and Kate that can answer any question, but please call me with any questions you may have as well.
I just thought of one more. I remember in a webinar talking about getting some talking points together for cities. So I'm guessing that either you've done that or you're working on that?
Working on it. That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll get you those. I think you have a copy of the resolution that was passed a couple weeks by the IPA board, and we'll condense that resolution. It's pretty dense and full of, the whereases that are tough to wade through. So yeah, we'll get you some key points from that resolution.
And may I also request the slides?
Yeah, I think you have a copy. I sent them to Alan. I think you have them, and
Okay, awesome, thank you.
okay.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Appreciate it.
Really good information. Thank you. We are just going to take a few-minute break while we wait for the other legislators to arrive. So we'll just take a quick break now for a few minutes. Okay, now we really will get started. Thank you so much for being here. We're really grateful that you, our legislators, are our friends, our partners. We appreciate your willingness to come and listen to us and participate. So we're gonna each tag team take a few of us are gonna take a few items and just share with you our thoughts, some of our concerns as we approach the legislature. And we'll turn the time over to Gary Hill to go first.
Yeah, thanks. Good to have you here. We have a number of topics that we wanted to bring to your attention and, leading up to the session. With Richard on a call for a minute, I think we're going to skip to housing legislation. And, there continues to be, especially with the CHA, a lot of discussion in housing space. And we haven't seen what the CHA is going to be recommending yet in legislation. We know it's being drafted. But in the lead up to this, there have been a lot of rumors and myths and innuendos and things that we wanted to debunk a little bit with some data as opposed to anecdotes. Some of these were even repeated at the Urban Land Institute meeting not too long ago. One of which was, municipal fees are driving the cost of housing. At the Urban Land Institute just a month ago, there was a number thrown out by, and I can't remember who it was actually, but that municipal fees are 30% of the cost of housing. And I appreciate you shaking your head, Todd. Thank you. You may have seen this, and it might be a little hard to see. I think we shared this last year, but this is data that came from Ivory Homes in 2008, where they were comparing the cost, 2018, where they were comparing the cost from 2008 to 2018. And they have not updated this, but you can see that back in 2008, the cost of municipal improvements is that orange slice. It was 5.2% of the cost of the house. In 2018, it was 6.2% of the cost of a house. So in reality, less than 7% of the cost of a home. So please don't get sucked into the argument that somehow municipal fees are this big contributor to the rising cost of housing. It's been relatively constant over the last 10 years. We haven't seen a massive increase in local fees in the last 4 years either. I would guess that we're less than 6% now. And just, by way of reminder, and I know this is old hat for you two, but this is also maybe beneficial for people that are listening online, but the fees that we charge are governed by state law, and we can't charge more than the cost of the service we're providing. And that includes paying for the infrastructure that goes in, that is created by the new development. So sewer, sidewalk, streets, water lines, et cetera. So our fees are paying for that. And it's a pretty simple equation. If the development community through the legislature is asking for cities to reduce our fees, then that just means that our taxpayers are going to have to pay more. The costs exist. It's a question of who pays for them, new development or existing residents. And it's been, cities' positions forever that new development pay its own way. Another myth that you've probably heard a lot is that cities don't want to permit multifamily housing. I think a lot of that is perpetuated by the fact that we have a lot of residents, or I should say we have a number of residents, all cities, that are vocal about this, but I don't think the data does not correspond with the fact that cities are not actually approving multifamily housing. There might be outcry, but the city councils are doing the hard work. So on the left is some information from the most recent Ivory Boyer construction report. Their quote that permitted multifamily units are continuing their record-setting pace. In the first 6 months of 2022, that was a 10.7% increase from the prior year. And you can see that single-family units had a decrease from the prior year of 6.5%. But the real relevant point here is, if you look at this chart since 2014, so over the last 10 years, you can see that in 2014, that of all cities, that's the orange line, 58% of all new permitted homes or all residential square footage was single-family residential. And then of the high-growth cities, places like Saratoga Springs or South Jordan, it was closer to 77% of all homes were single-family. Now, in 2022, that's decreased significantly to just over half of the square footage of residential housing is in high-growth communities, 53%. And statewide, the statewide average is less than half of the total amount of square footage that's being built for homes is multifamily. That's a real trend. These are numbers, I think, that have come from the state or the Ivory Boyer construction too. But it's hard to dispute the fact that cities have been increasingly permitting multifamily housing. There's a myth cities are not permitting enough housing, period. So we know a lot about the housing gap that's been talked about a lot by the Kempsey Gardner Institute that back in 2017 was estimated at 56,000 units. As of 2022, that went down to 31,000 units. More than 100,000 residential permits have been approved, not be approved, have been approved in Utah over the last 3 years. That's the greatest in any 3-year period of time in the state. But to me, this third bullet point is maybe the most significant one. Hi, Melissa, welcome. In addition to that number, 46 cities representing 40% of the state's population have an additional 93,000 units that have been approved and entitled that are just waiting for developers to build them. Those are lots that have gone through the entire development process. Now we're just waiting. That alone would close the housing gap and increase the number of units 3 times over the housing gap. That's a really significant number that never gets talked about. We have our own situation in Bountiful that kind of highlights that. Maybe, Mayor, you could talk about that for just now with Renaissance Town Center, where we see units that have been entitled, but now we're just waiting for the developer to get busy.
Yeah, that's right. We're experiencing that right here. We even have tonight a request for a delay in 6 months, and this is for a project that has been approved for over a year, where there's hundreds of units that have already gone through all the approvals process, and they're taking their time in getting those built. So we're identifying places, we're permitting, and then they haven't been acting. So.
Tonight on our agenda, we're giving a 6-month extension after a year to Renaissance Town Center to build their 200-plus multifamily units. That's after being approved a year ago, plus $1 million that the city's granted them through the RDA to build the road to help pay down the cost of infrastructure, and an additional $5 million toward the joint parking structure that the RDA has given as a loan that can become a grant if they meet certain building benchmarks to complete their project. It's a little frustrating as a city because we, like many, get accused of not doing what we can, and we feel like we've done just about everything we can with those units, and now we're just, again, waiting on the developer to build them. That 4th bullet point obviously is a copy. I apologize. And then, one other quick myth is that, cities aren't willing partners at the legislature that always say is no. And I think you all know, if you work with Cam Deal, that there's a guy who is willing to negotiate and talk and represents, I think, cities very, very well. But over the past, 5 legislative sessions, we've assisted with, supported. These are bills that we've either endorsed as a League of Cities and Towns, or we have not opposed. Most of them we've worked with the sponsors to come to a position of support or non-opposition. Most of them support, and we know there's still more work to do. But we would implore you, again, as always, to share with your colleagues that we hope to be treated like partners in the housing space, not as enemies. And we still feel like cities are very much being painted as enemies through anecdote, but the data does not show that. Mayor, was there anything you wanted to add on that?
I think that's great. Thank you so much. If you don't mind, Councilman Higginson, we'll just ask you to give a few ideas that you wanted to share.
Very quickly, first of all, thanks for being here. And second of all, thanks for listening last year during the issues at the legislature with IPP. We felt like we had good representation there. And we're hoping that we can have some great representation there again this coming year. Our power department and some of our power board are here tonight. And our power department, we tasked them with providing stable, affordable power to our residents, power that's locally controlled and cheaper than it would be if we were one of the customers of the predominant power department in the state. And lately there have been some real issues with maintaining that stable flow of power. You know that the Lila Canyon mine fire has caused issues with coal delivery. There's been issues with hydro generation because of the ongoing drought, which, maybe tonight's a nice omen of things to come. Natural gas prices have spiked, not only because of inflation, but because demand on that resource has increased as we shutter coal plants, the shuttering of which also has caused us to search elsewhere for stable resources. There have been delays in our contracted solar projects because of issues with China, and our reliance on China for our own power is another issue that we probably should cover at some point another time. But it seems like every other week there's another body blow to our power department in providing power to our residents. And what we hope to ask of you tonight, what we are asking of you tonight, is to please listen to the IPA folks, listen to all of the information I'm sure that everybody has, and please see your way clear to be advocates again for the maintenance of that arrangement that has benefited so many cities. The ability to lay off power, to have California cities pay for that plant, and yet to have that plant available to us going forward is just such a big deal for us to be able to provide the power that we need to provide for our residents. There's a letter that has gone out from Enchant, and I don't remember the name of the company that operates the data centers. I know that they are lobbying folks, including us, that they've got a way that they can save the coal functions at the plant and make everybody happy, and it'll be lollipops and sunshine for us all. I would caution you that there is a lot of information that's not included in their letter, and there's a lot of garbage in their letter as well, not to put too fine a point on it. But if we can enlist you again to help protect that process as the repowering goes forward, it just provides us another arrow in our quiver of stable baseload resources while we try to make the transition that is maybe a little uncomfortably quick to carbon-free or reduced carbon power. One other issue, I've heard twice now that there is a bill that's going to be put forward that's going to set a minimum time for public hearings in council and other meetings. And I don't know if any of you have heard of that, but it has caught the attention of some organizations, and the number that's being thrown around is that any public hearing that's opened in a public meeting will be at least an hour in length. And I would just implore you to not impose that kind of a restriction on us. This group this group sincerely wants input from our residents. We welcome everyone. We hope people feel free to speak, but we certainly have no interest in sitting here watching YouTube or doing whatever while we wait for the hour to expire. And that's all I have. Thanks again for being here, sincerely.
Thanks so much, Councilman Higginson. I just wanted to, you guys know, we spend a lot of time and effort on, right now we're redoing our general plan. We work on zoning, land use, we spend a lot of time on those things, and you know how important local control is when we talk about the difference between Bountiful, Park City, St. George. Every city is so different with our needs. And so I would just implore you to not take away our abilities to plan our communities. And there is talk about the state auditor limiting our ability to charge fees. We recently evaluated our fees for development, and this last year, fee by fee, line by line. And I can tell you, the residents and developers that are building here are getting a great bang for their buck. I don't think anyone could do it any better than just the way that we're doing it locally here. Also, just a question I'm sure that you have thought about in the whole housing realm, how do we guarantee lower costs and that the development will be cheaper for the buyer? The result could be that homes are cheaper to build, but there's no way of guaranteeing that developers choose to sell those units at affordable prices. And so the other thing, please just, you do so well, but please check in with us when there are bills that you think may impact cities. We'd love a text to say, how does this impact Bountiful? So thank you so much for caring and for being here tonight. I'll turn the time over to you, Councilwoman Bradshaw.
Thank you. One of the topics I've been asked to give you guys an update on are developer-led infrastructure districts, DIDs. I'm guessing that Senator Weiler, because of his local government service, may be familiar with PIDs, public infrastructure districts, from his time serving on a city council. But for the rest of you, that might be kind of a new term, PIDs and DIDs. PIDs have been a tool that could be accessed. They're a public infrastructure district, and they are a way for developers to fund different infrastructure components in a development. In order for them to use that public process and access public markets, requires a vote of the city council to allow them to form a PID. Though they exist in a toolbox alongside RDAs and CRAs and EDAs and all kinds of different tools for development, there has been a proposal that has been circulated in the new UEOC process, and it was an idea that was presented all on one slide in one paragraph to take the public part of that process out and make them developer-led infrastructure districts. We have some concerns that this would be a way for developers to access public funds potentially to do their projects, but no real hook to make sure that it is in the best interests of the community, that it would actually lower the price of housing. This has been pitched as an idea to get at affordable housing. There's really kind of three hooks in order to access the public markets, public bond markets, and you need to have some type of sovereign power. So you need the power of policing as one idea, you need taxing authority, or you need the power of eminent domain. And those are all things we'd want to make sure on your radar that you, if this idea were to move forward, that you might be giving developers these really important sovereign powers that have traditionally been reserved for elected bodies to exercise because of the need to make sure that those important powers, the power to tax, the power to take property, the power to detain someone and to infringe on their civil liberties are done transparently and in the public interest. And so we have some real reservations about DIDs and how they might be deployed. And we're just not seeing, quite frankly, a lot of detail yet beyond this one slide that was presented in the UEOC hearing this fall. The other thing I guess I would note on the developer-led infrastructure districts is when we're doing our planning and looking at our capital plans and which roads will be repaved and which parks will be improved and which water lines will be redone, we of course never have enough money to do all of them at once. We're making important judgments with our staff about why this road needs to go first or this water project is critical. If the developer creates some type of infrastructure, which then he or she deeds back to the city, we don't know that they might not build some type of infrastructure that is a very expensive unicorn that we are required to feed and care for ever after, with the expectation that that unicorn will sit at the front of the line compared to some of the other projects we have that are just regular workhorses instead of special unicorns. So that one is one that I personally have a lot of concern about how it's being drafted, and that those important checks that exist to make sure that infrastructure is done for the right reasons, and that if you're accessing the public markets, that it's really going to be something that flows through to make sure that those projects are affordable for the end buyer and not just affordable to the bottom line of the developer. So I would ask that as you guys are entering your caucus planning meetings and things like that, to keep an eye on this and to really be aware of the fact that they'll need at least one, if not more, of those sovereign powers that have been closely guarded in order to make that proposal work. Do you want me to quickly hit trails before you move to the chief? Or the other thing I'd note, some of you have gone mountain biking on some of our new trails. I still need to get Representative Ballard up on a mountain bike with me on a trail. But you, I think, are all aware that Bountiful's been deeply involved in developing our Trails Master Plan. We're really excited about this. Our residents have, taxed themselves through a bond in order to do this. We've applied and received state outdoor recreation grants. And so we're moving forward. On tonight's agenda, we'll approve 2 more RFPs for new trail construction. The governor, in his budget, set a marker out there of $100 million for trails. I know you all have deeply studied and plan to totally adhere to the governor's budget recommendations with your significant amount of surplus and revenue growth. But I just wanted to put a kind of a marker out there for you that is something that we are excited about. And while we build out these other phases, we'd certainly love to be able to continue to access state funds to build out that partnership. There's an active transportation component. Our trails on the foothills are great. We'd certainly love to be able to connect them with people using active transit that want to travel east-west through our city. Our neighboring cities would be great if they were able to start doing some of this planning as well and access those funds to connect our trails so they don't just stop at the Centerville or North Salt Lake border, but we're able to build out this network so that we can spread out what people love. We're very aware that people love Mueller Park Canyon and use certain trails a lot. And so part of our goal, just as it's been a goal I think statewide, is to help residents recreate in a way that spreads out the love and doesn't concentrate the love so that we overuse certain areas. So don't round file that page of the governor's budget. Save that page and think about it when you get to your appropriations committees.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman Bradshaw. Chief, would you mind taking a minute?
How do I do this? Speak to them and stand at this? Do you want me to go somewhere else or what?
You can go sit in by Galen.
Yeah, that's perfect. So I'm sure you know, this is our Chief of Police, Ed Beeler, and so thank you for presenting tonight, Chief.
You bet, and thanks for being here as well. So two things on the tow company front. One of them, as listed on here, is a company called Tow Pro. I'm not sure how familiar you are with them. It's a company that we use that helps us to manage our towing of vehicles. The Office of Regulatory Relief, I believe it is, in the Sandbox, changed some wording and some regulations that allowed this particular company to be able to, if a tow company uses them, which they have to use them to be a part of our rotation, to be able to pass on a $15 fee to the vehicle owner who has their vehicle towed. There's been there's been some pushback by an individual by the name of Brent Reeder out of Weber or Box Elder County. I'm not sure why he wants to make changes or what his beef is with it, but he is definitely making some waves in that business on not wanting to use or not wanting to allow this to happen. He prefers to have the taxpayers. So if we have to buy this program ourselves, the taxpayers have to pay for that as opposed to the towed vehicle owner having to pay for that extra service charge, which up until the Sandbox allowed it to happen, you couldn't pass that fee on.
Chief, could you maybe just take a minute and explain how we used to have to get a tow company?
Sure.
What the process was that we went through and that they would have to sign up for the list, and then explain why this new regulatory option is so much better.
Okay. And there's definitely benefits on both sides, so I'll do our side first. So beforehand, every year, we would send out a packet to all the tow companies who want to be on our tow rotation. They would fill out these packets that included insurance, background checks on all their drivers, all the things that the state requires for a tow company to be in business. They'd have to turn that in with their packet to us. Our administrative assistant would then compile all of that data, and we would approve pretty much everybody who applied to be with us. Then when a tow company gets called, our dispatch obviously uses the phone. They call each individual tow company that's on the rotation starting at the top. If nobody answers, they hang up. They have to call the next, and it would not be uncommon for them to have to call 2, 3, 4, 5 different companies to find someone that would answer the phone at the time and then accept the tow, which is another big component of well, because if somebody wasn't available, they would say, nope, we're not going to accept the call, and they'd have to go to the next person on the list. Obviously, you can see how much time that takes our dispatchers who are already in the midst of a difficult situation. So if you have a 2, 3, 4 car accident, they're already busy handling 911 calls and all the other normal radio traffic associated with that. So those are some of the benefits in the process that were associated with us having to get a tow company there. This Tow Pro is beneficial for the tow company because it's an app that so now for us to do it, we just get on the website, put the information in, and the computer does all that information for us. So once a dispatcher enters it, their job is done, and it automatically cycles through the rotation, sending a notification to the first agency's app. They hit accept or reject, and then it automatically does it on its own. So very beneficial for us to have that. The tow companies benefit because it is an app. They can log in at any time and see where they're at on the rotation. So say a company has just 1 or 2 trucks and they're also on maybe Davis County's rotation or Layton's rotation. If they know they're next on our rotation, they have the ability to send a truck closer to our area. You only have 20 minutes to be able to respond to a request for a tow service with us. So they're able to see where they're at on the rotation. They don't have to send a packet in anymore. As insurances expire, as they get new drivers, they can just automatically enter that in throughout the year. So there's not a one-time period where they've got to get all this documentation. They can do it when it's convenient for them and their stuff expires. So it's definitely beneficial for them as well.
I would say that in the year and a half that we've been using it, I'm honestly surprised about the number of violations that occur in tow companies and not following the law that we didn't know about before. We had no way to know whether they were compliant with their insurance except for July 1st when they turn it in. But if their insurance expires on August 1st, they could go the whole year without having any insurance. I'm going to give you one quick example on why I think that this is beneficial to us and the public's interest. Because it's on an app, and Mr. Reader, I think, has a problem with them being tracked while they're on a tow. Because they have to be there in 20 minutes, we had a tow company recently say that we gave them a discipline because they were there like 35 minutes later. They appealed it with me and said that it was because of traffic. We were able to log in and see the tow company, and they accepted the tow while they were actually at Holgo Zoo, thinking that they were going to be able to leave Holgo Zoo and get to Bountiful in time to be able to take this vehicle off of a street on an accident. Had we not known that, we probably would have just let it go, thinking, well, yeah, there must have been a lot of traffic, and that is what it is. Another quick one, you have to have a tow yard in South Davis County. We've suspended numerous tow companies because they're taking cars to Ogden and Salt Lake City, which makes it difficult for our residents who are trying to get their cars back to have to go that great distance. We would have no idea that that is occurring without this particular app. So that's kind of in a nutshell, I guess, what that means.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Is there anything else you want to add about that?
One quick one. I did send an email to Senator Weiler and Representative Ward about having to fill out a state tax impound report. Hopefully you were able to either look into that or at least understand why that's problematic to us as well. We would definitely like a fix to that, as we've talked to some of the other chiefs in the county as well who are also concerned about it, and specifically the Highway Patrol. It's taking us a lot of time to have to fill that report out. I'm not against whatever it's trying to fix with the tow companies, which my understanding is it's in an effort for an abandoned car. It makes it easier for them to take possession of the car and be able to sell it, and they need a tax ID number to be able to do it, or a state impound tax report number. To me, there's got to be a better way that doesn't negatively impact us, like just our police report number that we're already doing. Right now, we're having to do our report basically twice in order to fulfill that. So please look into that.
I would just want to see if any of you would like to come up and say anything briefly. Is there anything you'd like to say to us? Senator Weiler, Representative Ward, Representative Ballard?
I'll kick it off. I should have taken notes as we were going through this. Yeah, I'm not going to vote for a 60-minute public hearing ever. So I don't see that as a starter. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again, but the very best part of the Utah legislature is any one of the 104 legislators can run any bill that they want without anybody's approval. And the very worst part of the Utah legislature is that any legislator can run any bill that they want. And so, so I'm not saying, I haven't heard about that bill. I'm not saying that it won't run. I'll predict right now if it runs, it's not going to pass, at least at 60 minutes, but or even 30 minutes or whatnot. I thought the data for the housing legislation was very helpful, and a lot of that was new to me. The Tow Pro, that's new to me. I did get your email last month about the impound report, and I need to follow up with you on that. So the PIDs and the DIDs is new information to me. I didn't deal with those 20 years ago or 25 years ago in the Woods Cross City Council. The trails, yeah, I'm hoping that a lot of, well, I mean, let's be honest, 97.5% of Governor Herbert's budget is just what we did last year, so that's probably going to get approved. The other 2.5% is what we might fight over, but Governor Cox, as a former member of the legislature, even though it was like 9 months, and Lieutenant Governor Henderson, who spent 8 years in the Senate, they have been very, very collaborative, much more so than their predecessors with the legislature, with their budget priorities. And so my guess is, although I haven't been involved in those discussions, a lot of those budget pieces, including the trails, were probably discussed with House and Senate leadership before they were introduced. I'm just guessing that was the case. IPA, I'm not sure what's going to happen with that. I've heard some rumors that there's going to be a push to force IPA to sell their plant to the state. I don't know where that's going, but I think that may have legs rather than them shuttering the facility. That's kind of all new on my radar, but I got a call about it yesterday, and I said, yeah, I've heard that. I don't know, how much of how if that proposal has legs or not. I think that's probably all I have on that. So I'll yield to Representative Ward and Ballard.
Thank you for having us. I just want you to know the impact that your voice has for us who represent you and our neighbors and constituents, because even we start with one thing, but changes get made in bills, and it's the end bill that we end up needing to vote on, or up or down. And so it makes a difference when we hear, or bills that we don't know about yet, it makes a difference when we hear from you how it directly impacts the city and our residents. I will probably just echo pretty much most of what Senator Weiler said. IPA's been a very emotional thing for some of the legislators last year, but knowing that this is really a big a priority and has a huge impact on Bountiful residents has made a difference for me in how I voted in the past regarding how it will affect Bountiful City residents. So I just maybe thought I would mention two other things that you'll see from me this session that may also affect you. I have coming back my Safe School Route bill that came to the last day of the session a couple of years ago that I'm bringing back, where the school Transportation Council with the city, they get together and talk about safe school routes. And the cities will be required to respond within 30 days to the needs that the schools have. It doesn't mean you have to do the priority or that you have to do it, but there's been many cities that talk with the transportation committees and don't even respond or do anything. And so it just provides that communication access where safe school route passages, and by the way, I worked very closely with UDOT on this because they have funds available for cities to apply for to make changes for those safe school routes. So you'll see that from me. It's literally exactly the same as it was 2 years ago, and then COVID kind of put some other things in priorities. I'm doing a lot as the chair of higher education, and that relates also to other education bills that I'm doing. One of them relates to many of the things we've heard from our parents, which is content of schools. And I know that you do not have authority over schools, but it will have the ability of our local school districts to be able to deny or accept updates to online content with vendors that they have, or they could even get out of their contracts. So I think for our schools, for our families, that the LEAs now, the vendors are required to share that information of the updates that they give. Now the LEAs will actually be empowered to know what that information is. I think that's been a very emotional topic in our schools and for our libraries. And with higher ed, I'm doing a lot with corrections to prevent recidivism, including defining that with many entities across the state, and also be able to facilitate those who are getting out of prison to actually have a better trajectory for education and jobs before they even get out, instead of just being put on our streets. So I hope that will help a lot. I've been doing a lot of work with our police chiefs and and many around the state. So again, appreciate you reaching out to us regarding many things that we don't even know are on the list yet that will affect our cities. So we appreciate you having us be part of the things that are important to our city. So appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Representative Ward?
Thank you so much for having us down. I had just a couple of small questions that came up with some of the previous presentations. Thank you for that presentation, Councilman Higginson. Could you just remind me, there was a solar plant that we had very close to coming online. Has that been delayed by a lot or a little, or is that still on track? Where does that stand?
I think we're a little over a year delay so far on the earliest one. So we have contracts with 2 solar facilities. One's the Steel, which is in northern Utah. The other one, what's it called?
Red Mesa.
Red Mesa. Anyway, there have been delays on actual use of the solar panels themselves because of the provenance of those solar panels and whether or not they were made in facilities that are staffed by prisoners or third graders. We don't know which. So anyway, those are the delays in the solar projects that
So
we're
are those
experiencing.
indefinite delays, or do we feel like there's delays with a known endpoint that we're close to a finish, or?
One of those just had a force majeure again for the contracts, so we'll have to sign new contracts again because of the significance of the delay. The other one, a few months at a time.
So it looks like the latest I heard was March 15th is when Red Mesa will go online.
Okay.
And probably September of 2023 at the earliest for Steel Solar. Could have been delayed now till December 2023, a year from
Okay.
now.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm sorry to hear that, but thank you for that update.
You bet.
And Chief, just a question on your presentation, and thank you for bringing that back up again. Do you know if the Highway Patrol is also making a formal effort to kind of lobby there? They have a fairly constant voice down there at the Capitol. People are used to listening to them. Do you know if that's something also that they're focusing on? That would be helpful.
I'm not sure. We did talk at our last Davis County Chiefs meeting where they do have a Highway Patrol representative there, and it was still fairly early about, like, some chiefs weren't even aware that we had to do a state tax impound report yet.
Okay.
And so as word is starting to get out.
Okay.
But
I know
I'm
Weber
not
County
sure
Law
what-
Enforcement has invited the legislators to come up to a little breakfast thing where they were going to talk about some issues. That's the kind of issue that would, I mean, if they've got 12 legislators all together, it would be great to make a presentation to them while they're all together about it.
Representative Ward, was your question about the app or the report?
It was about the report,
Okay.
but I mean, on both accounts.
I do happen to know the Highway Patrol is in the middle of a pilot program that is a similar program to TowPro.
Okay, all right. I guess just to tell you a couple of the things that will be working on. As you know, we're 4 or 5 years into a Medicaid expansion here in the state, and when that came into being, the legislature had made a couple of modifications to the ballot initiative, and one of those modifications was to set aside some money to make sure that it didn't overspend or run the state into a deficit. And as we now have, 5 years of numbers to know how much the sales tax increase brought in versus how much we're paying out, to know that fund has a significant surplus that looks like it'll be an ongoing surplus. And so having that much more actuarial knowledge of how it's going, to me, it's time to come back and say, look, there are some other areas of expansion of Medicaid services that the state hasn't done, but that we've thought about a lot, such as giving women who have a baby coverage for a year postpartum instead of cutting it off at 60 days. There are a lot of benefits to that. Most of the suicides that we have of women in that very difficult time actually happen in that first year postpartum where they're under so much stress. To use some of that money to increase coverage of contraception for women at a slightly higher poverty level, especially because we expect that probably by the end of the year and next year, then our abortion trigger law I think will be approved by the courts and will be in place, and so to have the ability for women to have access to contraception would also be really important. And to cover children, so when children have Medicaid, just a policy decision that the state has considered many times but hasn't had funding for would be to cover children for a year at a time if they had coverage, instead of checking every 3 months if their parent didn't turn the right paperwork in and kicking them off the program, just to check that once a year. People do still need to meet the qualifications for the program, but by letting children have it for a year at a time, you decrease the number that get kicked off. So there are several areas to me where we could get better coverage from that excess money and still have a good reserve in the fund. And then I'll also be working on disability services, which have been very difficult in the state. We've got a waiting list that's, for a few people, is many decades, and many people wait years, and sometimes they're in a situation where their family member was little, but now their family member that's disabled is 6'4" and weighs 230 pounds and may be physically violent, or in some cases even sexually aggressive, just because that's the level of their disability, who sit on the waiting list for years. So hoping to find some way that we can get a better program long-term, so that at least every year we have some people coming into services. That'll be what I'll be working on, and I'll look forward to being in touch with you about the priorities during the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks very much for being here. And in light of the time, we have to get moving to our regular city council meeting that was supposed to be at 7. So we'll close this work session, but thank you so much for your time and for being here tonight. We'll just take a brief break. We'll just be back very quickly for our regular meeting.